Yes.
All right, cool. So, hello everyone. My name is Gabriel, and I'm going to talk here for about 10 minutes about assessing the quality of sources in Wikidata across languages. I am a PhD candidate at King's College London, where I currently live. I am specialized in natural language processing, knowledge graphs, and data science. And the focus of my research so far has been to define and assess quality in Wikidata. All right, so it is mainly about trying to see what the quality in Wikidata is through a research lens. And the main definition that we try to see, that we try to tackle Wikidata quality through is its references, right? So Wikidata has lots of references in their claims, and it is through its guidelines stated that these references should be, when present, that they should be relevant, that they should be authoritative, and that they should be easy to access by some users, or at least possible to access by some users. So what we did in my research was we took these three um, um, qualities, and we tried to see in Wikidata at scale, at a large scale, if these three held. The way we did this was through first taking a huge sample of claims and references in Wikidata, mainly of reference nodes, checking if we could resolve some sort of URL from them, if we could transform this reference into a identifiable resource online, and then taking some samples in 6 specific languages, which I'll get to later. Run some descriptive statistics to better understand how these references are distributed, and then check if we could crowdsource this analysis, right? So that means just the ones which we couldn't define by API calls, just give to people and ask them to tell us if these references are relevant, if they are authoritative, and if they are easy to access. And we just aggregated all these votes for majority voting, and then held a final data set, which we analyzed then through machine learning models. This was done at scale with 95% confidence interval, 5% margin of error, and the language we chose were English, Portuguese, Spanish, Japanese, Dutch, and Swedish. We looked at a equal amount of references from each of these languages to try not to steer things too much towards English, just because it is far more prevalent language for references. And we also looked at different types of references as well, what we defined as external references, which are like a direct reference URL, and internal, which are references that just point you back to Wikidata through identifiers, through Wikimedia imports, predicates, through stated in, for example, and so on. Looking at the statistics for these references, we see that most of them use the stated in predicate or the reference URL predicate, and then other ID predicates are used a bit distributed. In the actual breakdown of types of references that of predicates that are used to encode references, we see that majorly it just codes you back. It just actually gets you back to an item inside Wikidata, and then that's followed by some URLs. Its time is just like retrieved when it was retrieved, really, just here. So you see that going back to Wikidata items is very prevalent. And we also see that when we looked at the stated in, which is the main one used for these kind of references, most of the places it points you to, and you can see this on this graph to the right, are going to be online things. So like repositories, bibliographic databases, digital libraries, so digital resources, which is very good if you want to check things by yourself, because that means you don't need to go to a physical place or get a physical thing. All of these they exist online, right? So this is very good. The other thing you're looking at here on the left is that it's mainly going to point you towards scientific or biology websites. So you have Europe PubMed, Crossref, NCBI Gene, Uniprotein. Science and biology seems to occupy a large portion of Wikidata data. Looking at reference URL, you see the same thing: EBI, NCBI, Europe PubMed, same thing. We looked at how language was distributed in references in Wikidata. We see that English is like 80%, and then the others just kind of like German is a little bit, but then the rest just kind of like distributes itself with what remaining predicate references there are. We also see that through these references, all of them, we were able to extract a URL for around 60% of them. and an identifier for around 31% of them. Okay, the rest just actually gets you back to Wikimedia imports, stated URLs, which are stated in URLs that don't actually represent the information, just the overall place where the information was found. But that means that we can, for these two groups here, find in the web where the information theoretically came from. So we crowdsourced these analysis through two tasks. One, just asking people if these references are relevant or not, and to vote between 0 and 4 for ease of access, which is a negation actually, and then to tell us if they are authoritative, right? So that means telling us what type of author and publisher actually gave us this information. We did this through Amazon Mechanical Turk. We saw that references, they are around 90% relevant all across all the languages seen, which is a very good, it's a very good metric. We saw that mostly they are fairly to very easy to access, so either a 3 out of 4 or a 4 out of 4, with the exception of English, which is like 20% of them almost are just 0 out of 4. This is because they point a lot towards scientific and biological data and websites, which are very hard for people to tell or to access or to navigate and get the information that is encoded, or at least sometimes they don't even understand what the information they're looking for. Because of the nature of this data. Yeah, except for English. We also saw that for barriers, which are things that get in the way of people actually being able to access this information, Japanese references had a huge problem with page not available here. So most references in Japanese pointed towards Yahoo Japan, which has been shut down, and all links are now gone, for example. So you can see that there are specific problems that are particular to each language. Most of these barriers, they don't actually happen, except for English, right? So English has these problems, but none of the other languages seem to have them. And just overall, the main problem was just the lack of information, right? So the information in the websites and references weren't actually what the reference said. I'm going to just skip through these and just get to the takeaways because I have little time. Just to say that the main finding that we had that we did not anticipate was that Wikipedia references they're most easy to access. 77% of them are 4 out of 4, and they are the most relevant. 98% of them are relevant, which was very surprising considering that they are not authoritative at all. But that's by default because they are a self-published and collaborative source, so they are not actually themselves authoritative. So this is something that could be taken into consideration when analyzing provenance of data in Wikidata. The best option for you to code information in references in Wikidata is either to use direct URLs, like reference URL, or combine this with external identifiers. This is the best way to get very relevant and very easy to access and authoritative references. There's no questions asked. The other means don't even compare. And that relevance is the hardest one to verify, right? So we're going to develop a pipeline approach to try to see if there is a tool we can develop to try to identify if references are relevant or not. And we also saw that content across languages changes, but that the quality of references also changes, but that's more based on the trends in content than in the actual nature of the language. Right, so some languages, for example, some references, for example, in Swedish, they focus on museum data, for instance. References in Portuguese and Spanish, for example, they might focus a bit on sports persons, which is something that they do. So it's more tied to the nature of the data itself. Of course, this study has a few limitations. The crowd that we use is, of course, biased. Any crowd is biased, and Wikidata is very volatile. So this might change in the future. So thank you for listening to this. And if you have any questions or want to get in touch, I'll drop my contact in the public chat.